We're so glad you're joining us today for our conversation on bridging worlds, supporting abortion healing across cultures. We know your calendars are full, so the fact that you've chosen to spend the next hour with us tells us something. You care deeply about serving people well. One thing we've learned is that every person who walks through our doors brings more than their abortion story. They bring a lifetime of experiences, relationships, beliefs, traditions, and expectations that all shape how they see themselves and the world around them. Today, it isn't about becoming experts in every culture, because honestly, that's not possible. It's about becoming more curious, more compassionate, and more intentional in creating spaces where people feel safe enough to begin healing. So, we're your presenters today. Niles, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course, thank you, Karen. I'm Niles Penny. I'm the men's healing coordinator here at Support After Abortion. Can't wait to get into this information.
Thank you, Niles. My name's Karen Barbito. I'm the healing support specialist at Support After Abortion.
One of my favorite things about this work is that no two healing journeys ever look the same. I've worked with people from different countries, different faith backgrounds, different generations, and different family systems. Even when two people experience very similar circumstances, their healing looked completely different because the lens they viewed those experiences through were different. And that's what culture does. It shapes how we understand pain, whether we think it's okay to ask for help, how we express emotion, or whether we express it at all. What we'll cover today is understanding cultural influences on abortion experiences and healing journeys, recognize common cultural barriers to seek support, learn strategies for adapting support while maintaining program integrity, and practice culturally responsive facilitation skills. Culture influences far more than a person's background. It shapes how they understand pain, how they cope with it, and whether they feel safe enough to talk about it. And for us as facilitators, we often focus on what happened, but culture helps us understand how someone has experienced what happened. For example, two people may have had very similar abortion experiences, but their healing journeys can look completely different because of the beliefs, values, and messages they received throughout their lives. Culture also affects how people communicate. Some participants openly share their emotions from the very first session. Others may need weeks before they feel comfortable speaking. Neither response is better than the other. They're simply different ways of processing. It also influences trust. Some individuals may have had experiences where they felt misunderstood or even dismissed because of their background. That means they may enter our groups cautiously, wondering if this will be another place where they aren't fully seen or heard. This is why creating culturally responsive environments is so important. When people feel respected and understood, they're more likely to engage honestly in the healing process. Our goal isn't to know everything about every culture represented in our groups. Our goal is to remain curious, ask thoughtful questions, and avoid assumptions. Healing happens best when people don't feel like they have to leave part of themselves at the door. When we acknowledge the whole person, their culture, their story, their values, and their lived experiences, we create an environment where healing can truly take root.
What cultural messages did you hear growing up? I'm just going to share my personal experience with this and what came up for me when I read this question. I grew up in a two-parent household with two older brothers. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, cleaning, cooking, taking care of the kids. My dad worked. Some of the cultural messages I remember were men and women have different roles. Don't talk back. Marriage is for life. Never quit. And life isn't always fair. I'd love for everyone to think about your own upbringing for just a moment. What cultural messages did you hear growing up? Drop your answers in the chat. And even if somebody else has already put it in a second time, because it really makes a difference and reinforces when we find that other people experience the same messaging growing up as we did. Maybe your family talked about everything around the dinner table. Maybe your family avoided hard conversations completely. Maybe you heard things like keep moving, don't cry, What happens in this family stays in this family. Those messages become part of our culture. They're often so normal to us that we don't even realize they're influencing how we respond to grief. Hey, Margaret, what kind of responses do we have coming through the chat?
Some really great ones that I think a lot of us can relate to. A few people said that they heard the same as you, Karen. And then we've got sexist for marriage. Mental health problems are not real. That's a heavy one. We don't need to share the bad things going on with others. Work hard. I got that one too. Don't tell your marital problems to your siblings. Do not ask twice. Children should be seen and not heard. Share problems with others. Lots of really great ones. Thank you so much for sharing.
Boys don't cry. I just saw that one come through.
Avoid serious conversations. Pretend everything is okay. No
That's
hands-on love or support. Closet criers. I can relate. Don't show
those
your
are
emotions.
I'm so proud of you guys. You guys just fully invested in this responsive chat. I want you to keep it up because we have several of these during this presentation. That was great stuff. Thanks. Keep it up. Keep it up.
So, to continue the conversation, I want to mention that every person who walks into our groups or sits across from us in one-on-one conversations bring much more than their abortion stories. They bring a lifetime of experiences, values, beliefs, and expectations that shape how they understand what happened and how they heal. Think about some of the influences surrounding this experience. Belief systems also shape healing. People make sense of abortion through the beliefs and values they've developed over a lifetime. Their views about responsibility, justice, identity, forgiveness, or what gives life meaning can influence how they process grief and healing. Rather than assuming what someone believes, we can stay curious, ask thoughtful questions, and allow their own perspective to guide the conversation. Others are shaped by family expectations. Maybe abortion was never talked about, or maybe it was expected to stay a secret. Gender roles matter. Men may have learned that expressing grief is weakness. Women may feel pressure to carry everyone else's emotions while ignoring their own. Every culture has different norms around emotional expression. Some people process out loud. Others have been taught that emotions should remain private. It changes how healing may look. Faith and spirituality. For some, their faith may be a source of hope and restoration. For others, it may be the place where they carry the deepest shame. Still, others may have been deeply wounded by religious experiences. And for us as facilitators, we don't assume. We remain curious and compassionate and find the behaviors vary widely. Some people reach out quickly. Others may have spent years or even decades before believing they could handle this and contact someone for support. Healing begins when people feel understood, respected, and safe. When we lead with curiosity instead of conclusions, we create safety. And safety is often where healing begins. You're not just meeting someone's abortion experience, you're meeting the cultural, relational, spiritual, and personal context that surrounds it.
We'd love to hear from you because one of the greatest strengths of these trainings is learning from each other's experiences. I think it's very helpful. So I'm going to pose this question. What cultural factors have you seen impact a participant's healing journey? Many of you have walked alongside individuals from a wide variety of backgrounds, and you've probably noticed that no two healing journeys look exactly the same. So I'd like you to take a moment and think about this question. Drop your answer in the chat, and even if someone has already mentioned your idea, feel free to add it again. Sometimes seeing several people identify the same theme reminds us just how common those experiences are. We'll share some of them in a minute. Let me just add a few while you're dropping your ideas into the chat. You might have seen someone struggle because of family expectations or cultural stigma. Maybe faith was a source of comfort for some, or perhaps it was something they wrestled with because of shame or fear or self-condemnation. You may have worked with someone whose military background, ethnicity, gender expectations, or community values influenced how they processed their abortion experience, or whether they felt comfortable asking for help at all. Margaret, would you please share some of the responses coming through? I see them coming through.
So we've got, let's see, the more common abortion is in the community, the less the need for healing seems. Clients not knowing how to share their thoughts because they were never allowed to share in the past. Generational abortion. I had an abortion and I am okay. You will be okay too. Variances in religious beliefs, being ashamed of their family knowing, uneducated, no religious beliefs. Education is the highest priority over parenting. Men were just fixing the problem. Being from a rural community where pregnancy outside of marriage was considered wrong. Many women have been taught that they are not worthy of God's forgiveness. Abortion is okay, but we don't tell anyone because to admit it, you'll be judged. Getting sexually assaulted was normal in their culture. It wasn't a problem. Culture tells us it is not a big deal, so why am I feeling so alone and sad about it? We see that a lot. Military is a huge one. From ultra religious backgrounds, the person who had an abortion deserves whatever they feel regarding guilt and shame. They committed murder and shouldn't be forgiven. Nobody needs to know about what I did. We got a lot.
Yeah, let me ask Niles a question because that's a big variety. I don't think we're
Mhm.
going to be able to get to all of them, but yeah, we're going to try to do as many as we can. So, Niles, would you like to add a man's perspective to this question?
Oh, of course. And I can also speak to this from a man's perspective as well as my personal experience. Because when I was impacted by my abortion experience, I had a deep sense of isolation. And I had other men that could relate to that as well, and having conversations about my story as well as talking to them about theirs. And we feel that, especially when we have no safe place, we feel like there's no safe space to talk about it, or we don't really understand our roles in our abortion or our emotions that are attached to it. So that also can make us feel a sense of carrying guilt, regret, anger, or like for myself, I feel like I didn't deserve forgiveness from myself and I didn't need support from someone else just because I felt so bad.
Thank you for that, Niles. I appreciate that. Can I be vulnerable just for a minute? Early in my career, I thought if I just read enough books or attended enough trainings and learned enough about different cultures, eventually I'd know exactly what every client needed. Then I realized every client kept proving to me they were different from the last. And honestly, that's a good thing. It reminded me that no amount of knowledge can replace genuine curiosity. We can't pigeonhole people. Every person who comes to us is the expert of their own story. Yes, it's important to learn about different cultures, traditions, and experiences, but cultural humility reminds us that we never arrive. It's not about checking a box and saying, now I'm culturally competent. Instead, it's a lifelong posture of learning. It means approaching every participant with openness, asking thoughtful questions instead of making assumptions, and recognizing that each person's lived experience is unique, even if they share the same culture, faith, ethnicity, or background as someone we've worked with before. Cultural competence helps us understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with people from different cultural backgrounds. So, how is cultural humility different from cultural competence? Cultural humility is the posture we bring to our work. Let's talk about 4 ways we can grow culturally humility. First, we continue learning. Developing cultural humility isn't a certificate we earn or a training we complete and then check it off our list. It's an ongoing commitment to keep learning from every person we meet. Every client teaches us something new if we're willing to listen. The second and third ways go together. We approach each person with curiosity instead of assumption. This requires openness and self-reflection. We all have experiences, values, and assumptions that shape how we see the world. The important part is recognizing them and keeping them from getting in the way of serving someone well. And fourth, empowering clients. As facilitators, we're often seen as the expert in the room. But healing isn't about us having all the answers or directing their journey. It's about creating space where participants feel safe enough to share their story. After all, they're the experts on their own experiences. We empower them by listening, honoring their lived experience, inviting their perspective, and working alongside them. We don't have to have all the answers. In fact, some of the most meaningful moments happen when we're willing to say, help me understand, rather than assuming we already do. That's the heart of cultural humility. It's less about being the expert and more about being present, curious, and willing to learn from the person sitting across from us. Okay, here's another interactive chat moment. We'd love to hear from you on this question. What other benefits can come from practicing cultural humility when helping clients? Drop your answers in the chat.
We've got, let's see, we learned something new, personal
Yes.
growth, empathy and listening skills, helping build trust, greater openness and trust. Others in the group benefit. When clients see us as genuine, they are way more open to share. Very true. We learned empathy and listening, show genuine interest, increases trust and openness, creates a safe, grace-filled space for honesty and transparency. I love that.
Yeah, that's great. Those are all great responses. When I think of this question, the first thing that comes to mind is even though our cultures are so varied, through embracing our differences and accepting others' beliefs and lifestyle, we can connect in a truly deep way. The thing that's great about us is that we're all different, right? I embrace that. I love that. If we were all the same, it would be a boring world. The key message from this cultural humility section is we do not need to be experts in someone's culture to support them effectively.
Now, I want to discuss some of the common culture barriers to healing. These culture barriers can act like invisible walls standing between a person and the support they want. It could be stigma and shame, where someone feels they have to hide their experience or carry it alone. I can relate. I don't know, others can relate as well. Or family secrecy, where certain topics are not openly discussed. I've met a few having conversations with those I've supported. For some, religious condemnation or fear of community judgment can create hesitation or fear around seeking support. Other barriers might include language differences, distrust of helping organizations, or gender expectations that influence how someone believes they should respond, grieve, or ask for help. And sometimes, even with the best intentions, we can create barriers when we approach healing with one size fits all mindset. Instead of offering help or resources that recognizes each person's unique story, background, and needs. We may never know why that wall exists, and that's okay. Our role is to approach each person with curiosity, humility, and compassion so we can help them create a path toward healing. When we see someone hesitate, pull back, become quiet, or even push against support, our first instinct can sometimes be to view that as a resistance. But what if we looked at it differently? What may appear as resistance could actually be a form of protection. It may be someone protecting themselves from shame, rejection, judgment, or the fear of reopening a painful experience they may have worked hard to carry. For many people, behaviors that may seem like resistance developed for a reason. They may have learned that silence feels safer, that vulnerability comes with risk. Some men can relate to that more than others, or that sharing their story could have negative consequences. For us as facilitators, our role is not to force someone through that wall, it's to create enough safety and trust that they no longer need that wall to protect them.
As we begin to understand some of the barriers that can impact healing, the next step is to recognize that grief does not always look the way we expect it to. People process painful experiences differently based on their culture, their relationships, their beliefs, and their own personal story. Some may openly express their emotions, while others may become quiet, avoid the conversation, or appear as though they are unaffected. It's important that we don't measure someone's grief by how we would express it or how we've seen it expressed in the past. What may look like anger, distance, numbness, or even a desire to move on may actually be someone's way of coping and protecting themselves. Our role is to stay curious, create space, and recognize that every person's path toward healing may look completely different. Not everyone grieves the same way, and what someone is feeling or thinking may not be evident from their posture or facial expression. Take a look at the pictures on the slide. Some of these images are obvious to me, like the girl screaming at her phone. To me, that says anger or frustration. Same for the guy on the bottom left. But I could be completely wrong in that assumption. We can't assume we know just by how somebody is emoting what they're actually feeling. And what I can be completely wrong in that assumption. We can't assume we know just by how somebody is emoting what they're actually feeling. are going through. I'd like to hear from you. The girl with the blue background, what is she feeling or thinking? Or how about the guy with the white shirt on in the upper right-hand corner? Drop your answers in the chat.
Someone said indifference and numb, not wanting to really share or open up. The girl could deal with grief by using sarcasm to cover up. Not trusting. The girl looks like she doesn't care. The girl looks skeptical. The guy looks ambivalent. The girl isn't sure. The girl looks like she doesn't care. The boy seems ashamed. The man in white seems guarded. The girl in blue may be gauging your reaction first to see if she can trust you. Very good point. The girl in blue is covering up the pain she is feeling by putting up a front.
That's good.
Girl, what? I can't undo what was done.
Thank you for those. So now the key message, the takeaway from this is that we want to avoid measuring healing by emotional display.
The words we choose, the questions we ask, and the way we listen all shape whether someone feels safe enough to share their story. When clients feel heard instead of judged and understood instead of assumed, trust begins to grow. And trust is often the foundation that makes healing possible. Here are some communication tips that help to bridge cultural differences. While I read these, please drop in the chat the ones that stand out for you. Ask, don't assume. Listen for values and beliefs. Use person-centered language. Respect different communication styles. Reflect what you hear. Allow for silence. Margaret, would you read some of the comments in the chat, please?
Of course. Ask is a big one. Listen and reflect. Allow for silence. Listen for values and beliefs. Allow for silence. Allow for silence. Allow for silence. It's a very popular one. More allow for silences. Ask and reflect. Reflect what you hear.
That's awesome.
Thank you for everyone for your responses. Karen, I would love to hear which one jumped out at you.
Allow for silence. I think for many people, it is uncomfortable letting the room fall quiet. However, when we fill it in with talk, handing a tissue, or changing the subject, we are robbing that client from feeling what has come up for them. Feeling is necessary for grieving, and it's not comfortable. I work every day to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. How about you, Niles? Which one jumped out at you?
I'm going to try to be a little bit different from everyone else, but mine is ask, don't assume. And this comes from my life as just an athlete, being in this field as well as being a coach. And I use this thought process because when I approach my players, as well as when we talk to clients, especially with certain experiences like this, I want to lead with compassion and curiosity. I want to have it as a focus. I want to allow them the freedom to speak and feel that I am interested. I want to hear everything that they're experiencing and healing.
Thank you, Niles.
So now we're going to move into reframing the question. This is still about language choices. How would you reframe this question? Don't you think you should have done something different? I don't even like reading that question because that's just not comfortable for me. But I want to ask you, how would you change this up? Using compassionate, non-judgmental language. Please drop your answers in the chat.
We've got what options did you have? What brought you to this decision?
Thank you. Now let's look how we reframe the question. When you look back now, what things influenced you?
So, Niles, what is it about the reframed questions that makes it better than the first question? Don't you think you should have done something differently? Just so that people understand what we're trying to do here and how these different statements or questions might make a client feel.
One thing is that it leaves them to have freedom to speak and say whatever is on their mind. We like to have open-ended answers.
Here's another question that a facilitator might ask a client. Just so you know, this is the wrong way. This is the wrong way. So here's the question. What is still making you upset after all these years? How would you guys reframe this question? Drop your answers in the chat. And by the way, tone of voice really emphasizes the questions that could be judgy, right? That could make people who are feeling bad already feel worse.
We've got some coming in. What are you still struggling with? What hurts your heart? What are some things that still bother you in daily life? What are you feeling right now? I see speaking about this still brings up emotions for you. Can you share what is going on in your heart right now? What comes up for you when you think about this?
So just to compare those two questions, I think it's pretty apparent to everyone that the first question can be very judgy, could be making the assumption that you should be over this by now. Grief has no time frame attached to it, and people grieve differently, right? So even asking a question like this will potentially make somebody feel worse if they've been grieving for 20 years, right? And the second one, the reframed one, this is kind of just an open-ended question that gives them the opportunity to think about how has this experience continued to affect you over time? It's a great question. I don't think it would make somebody feel worse about themselves, but would have them give some thought to what is it that's keeping me hurting like this for this long of a time? This small shift in language can make a tremendous difference. Questions that begin with "why did you" can sometimes feel like they require someone to defend or justify their choices, even when that's not our intention. Instead, try leading with curiosity. Phrases like, "What was that like for you?" Or "What was happening for you at that time?" Invite people to share their story without feeling judged. Our goal isn't to analyze someone's decisions or figure out why they made them. Our goal is to understand their experience. Because people are far more likely to heal when they feel understood, accepted, and heard than when they feel like they're being evaluated. Has it ever felt good for you to feel like somebody was evaluating you?
Culture and diverse worldviews play a significant role in how people make meaning of their abortions and their healing journeys. As facilitators, we don't want to assume what someone believes or doesn't believe. Two clients from the same faith tradition may have very different experiences. Someone who doesn't identify with the religion may still have a deeply held values and beliefs that shape their healing. When we approach conversations with respect, curiosity, and humility, we create space for clients to explore questions of meaning, hope, forgiveness, and healing in ways that are authentic to them. Participants' culture influences much more than their traditions or language. It often shapes how they understand their healing journey. It can affect how they make sense of grief, whether they experience guilt or shame, what forgiveness means to them, where they find purpose, and what gives them hope for the future. As facilitators, our role isn't to define those meanings for someone else. It's to create a safe space where they can explore what these concepts mean in their own lives. When we approach those conversations with curiosity instead of assumptions, we build trust in a supporting, healing way that honors each person's unique story. Culture shapes how individuals understand their experience with abortions, influenced by various factors. Family and community. Family attitudes toward privacy, conflict, and support can vary, impacting how individuals process their experiences. Race, ethnicity, and heritage. These factors affect community expectations, discrimination, and trust in healthcare providers. Geographical region. Rural, suburban, and urban settings influence anonymity, access to services, and local attitudes toward abortion. Generation and age. Different generations may have varying comfort levels with mental health discussions and support affecting processing of experiences. Gender roles and expectations. Societal views on strength and emotional expression can impact willingness to seek help. Socioeconomic and educational background. Financial and educational factors influence access to support and resources. Language and immigration experiences. Language barriers and immigration history can affect how emotional expression and communication are shown. Faith and spirituality. Beliefs can influence feelings of guilt, grief, and healing, requiring sensitivity and respect and support. Professional cultures. Environments like healthcare and law enforcement shape expectations around privacy and emotional expression. Each individual's combination of these influences is unique, and understanding their story is essential. Because these cultural experiences vary so much, The best way to understand and meet a person where they are is to simply ask them, is there anything about your background, values, family, community, or beliefs affecting how you experience this? The question is open, respectful, and doesn't make any assumptions. It helps remain curious about what is impacting and meaningful to them. And when they share something, you can follow up with something like, tell me more about what that means for you. The goal is to understand how this person makes sense of their experience so we can meet them with compassion and provide support that respects their culture and values. Consider this scenario with me. Our participant joins a healing group but rarely speaks. She says, in my family, we don't talk about these things. We just move on. I've said that before. What cultural influences might be present? Please drop your answers in the chat.
Hey, Niles, how would you answer this question?
For me, the first thing my mind goes to is family norms around emotions, because this is something I personally grew up with. She may have grown up in a family where painful experiences were kept private and discussing them were seen as inappropriate, or stigma and shame. She may have felt there may have been unspoken expectation that abortion grief or family struggles may remain secret to protect the family's reputation. Margaret, do you have anything what people are saying in the chat that you'd like to share a little bit?
Sure. Someone said family expectations as well as family shame could be present.
The key message here is the goal is not to be an expert in every belief system, but to listen with curiosity, respect, and cultural humility. Don't assume, ask.
We've talked about understanding culture, recognizing different expressions of grief, meeting clients where they are, communicating with humility, and respecting diverse beliefs. The question now becomes, how do we put all of this into practice? Building a supportive healing environment isn't about having every answer or becoming an expert in every culture. It's about creating a space where every person feels safe, respected, valued, and welcomed. Often it's the small things, how we greet someone, the language we use, the assumptions we avoid, and our willingness to listen, then communicate. You belong here. Your story matters, and you're safe to share here. When people experience that kind of environment, trust begins to grow. And where trust grows, healing has the opportunity to grow as well. Would someone from a different background feel they belong here? That's a great question. It invites us to look deeper than simply saying, everyone is welcome here. True belonging is something people experience. When someone walks into a healing environment, they are bringing their whole story, their culture, family background, beliefs, values, and personal experiences. Those things influence how they understand grief, healing, forgiveness, and hope. So we have to ask ourselves, would someone with a different background feel safe sharing their story here? Would they feel respected, heard, and understood? Or would they feel like they need to change, adapt, or not share something before they can truly belong? So we need to approach each person with humility, curiosity, and a willingness to listen. Now that we've talked about the importance of belonging, let's look at some practical ways we can help reduce cultural barriers in our healing environments. Often it's the small things that communicate safety and respect. The words we use matter. Welcoming language helps people feel invited into the conversation, while avoiding assumptions or stereotypes allows us to see each person as an individual rather than through a label or expectation. Offering diverse referral options is another important step. Not every person will connect with the same type of support, and providing different pathways to healing helps honor different needs, beliefs, and preferences. We also want to consider accessibility, whether that means language, communication style, or making sure resources are understandable and available to the people we serve. Finally, feedback is essential. Ask and learn from the people we support to be sure we're meeting their needs. At the center of all of this is emotional safety. Before someone can be vulnerable and share their deepest experiences, they need to know they are in a space where they will be heard, respected, and cared for. Complete this statement. One thing I will do differently as a facilitator after today's training is drop it in the chat.
While everyone's doing that, Karen, I'd like to ask you, how would you answer this?
I knew you were going to do that to me, Niles. Oh man, I think for me, I want to allow people to be where they are without assuming anything and without judging them for not being in the place I might want them to be. As healing providers, we want to see people get better, right? We want to see them progress, grow in emotional strength. And so sometimes we can place our judgment on where we think they should be after 6 weeks or after 12 weeks or whatever the time frame is. And I want to avoid doing that. As we often say, no expectations. Okay, now, so I'm going to put it back on you. How would you answer this?
I think for me is ask, don't assume, but also is me being more aware of the cultural differences and belief systems while also being more curious to learn more and help me adapt to them and their experiences to support them as needed.
Margaret, could you highlight a few of what the attendees have put into the chat?
Of course, a lot of people are saying approach clients with more empathy, being mindful of language, use more what and how questions, avoid why questions, be more curious about a person's cultural perspective. Remember that vulnerability starts with emotional safety.
Very good. Those are all great answers. You guys are rock stars today. I'm just saying it. So, the key takeaways from this presentation: culture shapes healing experiences. Cultural humility is more important than cultural expertise. Healing support should be adaptable and participant centered. Meeting people where they are creates greater opportunity for healing.
Do we have any questions that came through?
Niles, I'm going to give you this one. What if a client doesn't show traditional signs of grief? How can we find out what may be happening beneath the surface?
Oh, that's a great question. So, kind of what Karen talked about before, grief doesn't always look like sadness or tears. For me personally, it looked like isolation, anger, and irritability. Some people stay busy, minimize their experiences, or seem emotionally disconnected as a way of coping. That doesn't mean they aren't hurting, but instead of assuming they're not grieving, we should be curious. Ask open-ended questions like we mentioned before, and ask things like, how has this experience affected you? Or what has this experience been like for you over time?
Karen, I will
Or
give you this one. How can providers support someone who has been taught to keep painful experiences private?
that is a great question. And that's exactly what this whole presentation is about, right? As someone who has been taught by family, by culture, by their past, by religion, or past experience to keep painful experiences private may approach abortion healing with caution, reluctance, or even discomfort about being emotionally open. A supportive provider can respect those protective patterns while creating conditions where sharing is optional rather than expected. Some approaches that can help would be building trust gradually. People are coming in and meeting other people for the first time. They don't know them at all, and trust doesn't show up just because the people have shown up. Right. So build trust gradually. And that's what group guidelines are for. And that's what, like, relating to what other people are sharing is all about. Give the client the control to choose what to share and when to share it. Normalize a range of emotions and reinforce confidentiality, that nobody's going to be talking about what went on in the group outside of the group.
Karen, I'm going to give
Mhm.
you this one. What are some respectful ways to ask about someone's spiritual beliefs without making them feel judged?
That again is a great question, especially if their spiritual beliefs are different than ours, right? I'd say be open to the words they say, listen to the words that they say, their social cues they present, like posture or eye contact, and ask them if they'd like to share a little about their beliefs. I'd be curious. I'd maybe even say, I don't know much about your beliefs, and I'd really like to learn. Could you share what's important to you? We should embrace our differences and allow ourselves to expand and learn.
I love that. All right, one more. I'm going to give it to Niles. What if a client feels disconnected from their faith community because of their abortion
Mm.
experience?
That's a good question.
And it happens all the time.
Yes, and this is something I can relate to a little bit because I'm from South Carolina, grew up in the Bible Belt and experienced abortion. But I feel like a lot of people carry fear, shame, or uncertainty about how they will be received after an abortion experience. Because of that, others may feel disconnected from their faith community or believe they have no belonging. So I think for us as facilitators, our role is to create a safe space, like I mentioned, where they can be honest about those feelings without judgment, and we can listen and acknowledge their experience to help them explore what they need for healing. We are so glad you all joined us today. We look forward to seeing you next time.